I took the approach realistically that I felt that I could understand the black pressure, the needs, the problems and faults better than my opponents because I was Jewish. That I felt some prejudices myself. Now I couldn't feel what a black could feel, but I felt I could feel it better than my opponents. I meant that, and I made that message clear to the audiences.
So the other thing I said was, Governor, you just been elected, you got your program here to run, and this job in Washington in the Senate is a different job. Politics are different, and the whole subject is different. I said, if you got some ideas about how that ought to be done, well, I'd like for you to say so now, because it would be my plan to conduct it as a separate thing from the governor's office in Atlanta. And he said, that's the way I'd like for it to be done. He said, you need to have your own platform, your own program, and your own politics. And I said, well, that could get us crossed up some. And I said, well, that is possible. I hope not, but I hope you would understand if that comes up that way. I certainly will understand if you are dissatisfied with me, that you're free to say so. And so we had an understanding about that, and so I told him, yes, I will accept it. So a day or two later, it was announced, and I went off to Washington.
So I really made it a point to be active with the black community and with the churches. But I think one of the interesting things, I was at the, I believe it was one of the churches in Waycross, and I spoke to the congregation and had a nice, I felt like talk. And later on, I was in the office with the pastor there, and he said, well, young man, we all go vote for you. And I said, well, that's wonderful. I said, you like my comments and what I said? No. He said, no, not particularly. Said every white person running for office comes down here and says the same thing you're saying. I said, well, why you go vote for me? He said, well, you've already proven yourself. And I said, well, how is that? He said, well, you have all those Stuckey stores up and down the highway. I said, yes, sir. He said, well, when folks in this part of the country, when we travel north, we try and plan our trips. You got to remember now, this was the early 1960s. We plan our trips to stop at the Stuckey stores because the restrooms, they aren't segregated. And I said, well, Reverend, I appreciate that, but I said, I have to be honest with you. I said, the reason that probably we don't have them segregated, my father was too cheap to build two different sets of restrooms. He said, well, it didn't matter because y'all never segregated the restroom. So when I got back home that night, I went up and I said, Daddy, thank you. I appreciate it.
I remember spending a week, back in the 40s, 44, I guess, I spent a weekend in the dormitory at Spelman, living with black students and eating in the cafeteria with black students. And that was, like the first time I'd ever been in a social relationship with black people, and you couldn't go out and eat together in public. And that was the same time when we all got arrested. I mean, a little later, it was 48 when we got arrested in Atlanta, and I was working with the YWCA. But anyway, I remember eating in the cafeteria and sitting by with black women, and one of them got up and left, who was sitting next to me. And the other woman on the other side said, oh, I'm real sorry, but she's prejudiced against white people. And it just shocked me because I thought, I'm supposed to be the one that's prejudiced. I didn't know prejudice acted both ways.
People would ask me, what you gonna do about the flag? And this is not something I'm proud of, but it's the truth. And I'd say to them, you know what I'm gonna do about the flag. The truth of the matter is I didn't know myself until I was confronted with it and had to actually take a position. I didn't know what I would do. And I'm glad I was part of trying to change it. I think I took the right position. Just like Denmark Groover, when he had a chance to change his position, he did so. I'm glad Denny did that before he died.
Well, one thing I learned from Speaker Murphy was when you go to preside on every bill, you better have your mind made up how you're going to vote, or you're going to get caught in a mess. Well, I knew how I was going to vote, but I had no idea it would. You have to have 91 votes for a constitutional majority. The vote comes up 90 votes, and I said, "Oh my God! You know, I'm representing a conservative district. We'd just gone through that thing with Roy, and." So I took a deep breath and I said, "Chair votes aye, this bill having received the requisite constitutional majority is therefore passed." People were stunned. Lynn Westmoreland was standing there saying, "What happened? It only got 90 votes, you know." A lot of people never realized what happened. There was a silence in the whole chamber, which seemed like 4 or 5 minutes with only 15 or 20 or 30 seconds. And then whatever side you're on, there was some moaning and groaning and some cheering. Of course, I gavelled everybody back to order, and I remember one thing that stuck out in my mind. David Lucas stood up and said something, way to go, Mr. Speaker," or something like that, and I said, "Please sit down, David." And I had to stand there and take a breath because I never ever thought I would have to be the deciding vote on that. But it was the right thing to do, and we got a great flag.
And the night of the election, he and Babs were at home, and I called him to tell him to come on down. He'd won the election. And he said, "I told you not to get excited. I hadn't won that election." He said, "You know, I probably won't even be in the runoff." I said, "Elliott, there's not going to be a runoff, and you have won." He said, "You just wait till Midway comes in." I said, "Midway's in, and you carried it." And he said, "Oh my God, they don't know what they've done." But then he went to the legislature, and he was really good. Of course, some people might not think this is good, but if it wasn't for Elliott Levitas, there wouldn't be a MARTA system in Atlanta. He also started cleaning up the Chattahoochee River, and did all sorts of wonderful things that I'm sure he probably told you about.